Number 2, do not judge. All right, this is on page 106, so right at the start of chapter 8. Quote, I sat at the dining room table with the shoe in front of me, trying to figure out what the point of it was. I looked through the remaining boxes under the tree, thinking that perhaps the shoe's twin had been wrapped separately. But no, there was just the one, a gold lame shoe with a 4-inch heel filled with hard candy. Both the individual candies and the shoe itself were wrapped in cellophane. Where had this thing come from, I wondered? Had it been a door prize? Or a party favor from a luncheon? Donald came through the pantry from the kitchen. As he passed me, he asked, "What's that?" I said, "It's a present from you." "Really?" he said. He looked at it for a second. "Ivana!" he shouted into the foyer. She was standing on the other side of the Christmas tree near the living room. "Ivana!" "What is it, Donald?" "This is great." He pointed at the shoe, and she smiled. Maybe he thought it was real gold. It had all started in 1977 with a 3-pack of Bloomie's underwear, meaning Bloomingdale's underwear. Retail $12. My very first Christmas present from Donald and his new wife, Ivana. That same year, they had given my brother Fritz a leather-bound journal. It looked as though it were meant for somebody older, but it was really nice. I felt a bit slighted until we realized that the journal was 2 years out of date. Well, at least the underwear they gave me wouldn't expire. The president has been trying like mad to make this book not appear in print. But here it is. A bunch of other journalists, including me, got an advance copy today. I read the whole thing, cover to cover, including the prologue, the epilogue, and the acknowledgments. The book is called Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. And it's a family story. I mean, the president is one of 5 siblings. There were 3 boys and 2 girls in his family. His 2 older sisters are Elizabeth and Marianne. More on Marianne in a second. The president also has a younger brother whose name is Robert. You might have seen Robert in the news recently because it was in Robert's name that basically the president has tried to stop this book from being published by using his anti-First Amendment lawyer to bring a lawsuit against this book's publisher. We'll have more on that in a minute as well. But the president also, once upon a time, had an older brother as well. An older brother named Fred, who died years ago at the age of 42 after years of alcoholism. Well, Fred's daughter, Mary, who's now 55 years old. She has a PhD in clinical psychology. Her name is Mary Trump, and she is the author of this book, which comes out next week. I can tell you tonight some of what's in it, because I am not embargoed from telling you some of what I've just read here. And so I'm going to tell you some of what I have just read here. And you know, honestly, a lot of it is just a family portrait, like the story about the random gold lame shoe. What's that? It's my present from you. You know, family portraits can be either just weird or maybe interesting, depending on your level of interest in that particular family. But one family member in question here is now the President of the United States, who is currently at the helm of, I think, what is inarguably the most disastrous presidency in modern American history. A family portrait of him and how he became who he is and who he has long been, it can send a chill down your spine, even when it's also sometimes funny. For example, given the president's current somewhat terrifying relationship with the U.S. military, which recently includes him ordering what he called heavily armed U.S. troops into U.S. streets to deploy against U.S. civilians, and him requesting military parades in his own honor. And given the unnerving nature of his relationship with the U.S. military, it is additionally unnerving to read the family story version of him and the military and how that touches, perhaps, on these current concerns. On page 169 of Mary Trump's new book, it is a little bit unnerving to read about how the president threatened to disown his own son if his son joined the military. Quote, "When my brother Fritz and I pointed out that all our cousins would still benefit from the will, our uncle Rob, Robert Trump, the president's younger brother, told us, quote, Any of them could be disowned at any time. Donnie, meaning Donald Trump Jr., was going to join the army or some BS like that, and Donald and Ivana told him if he did, they'd disown him in a second. President threatening to disown his son if he joined the military. Casts a shadow, looms a little bit over what we understand about his bizarre relationship with the military and his perception of their role in his administration, I guess is the nice way to put it, now that he's president. Then there's the family lore and the lived experience of the author when it comes to our president's feelings about women and the way he talks about women and what he thinks is important about women. And this is, I guess, in keeping with a lot of other things that we have learned about him over the time, but still, it's additionally unnerving. This is from page 150 of the book. Quote, "The next day, I spent the morning exploring the property. There were no other guests, so the entire place felt empty and strangely quiet. I took a quick swim before lunch, which was scheduled for 1 p.m. As formal as Mar-a-Lago was in some ways, it was also much more casual than our usual family gathering places. So I felt comfortable wearing a bathing suit and a pair of shorts to lunch, which was being served on the patio. Donald, who was wearing golf clothes, looked up at me as I approached, as if he'd never really seen me before. 'Holy bleep, Mary, you're stacked!' She was his niece. He had known her since birth. 'Holy bleep, Mary, you're stacked.' The reason that Mary Trump was at Mar-a-Lago for that barfy little scene in the book is because the president by that point had asked his niece, had asked Mary Trump to ghostwrite one of his books for him, one that was to be called The Art of the Comeback. And Mary Trump details in chapter 9 of the book the difficulty she had in trying to prep material for writing that book, because even though she describes being set up with an office inside Trump Tower and getting basically full access to the operations of the Trump organization, even though she was even invited to listen in on speakerphone to lots of Mr. Trump's phone calls that he was on all day, she says she could never actually figure out what he did in terms of work. He didn't really seem to do any work, so she couldn't figure out exactly what she was going to write about him. What she thought was going to be her saving grace for ghostwriting this book came when her uncle, Donald Trump, volunteered to her that he had started writing something for the book himself, and she could use it. She says he was very excited about it. But one night as I sat at home trying to figure out how to piece together something vaguely interesting out of the uninteresting documents I'd been poring over, Donald called. He said, "When you come into the office tomorrow, Rona's going to have some pages for you. I've been working on material for the book. It's really good." He sounded excited. Finally, I might have something to work with, some idea about how to organize this thing. I still didn't know what he thought about his comeback, or how he ran his business, or even what role he played in the deals he was currently developing. But the next day, Rona handed me a manila envelope containing about 10 typewritten pages, as promised. I took it to my desk and began to read. When I finished, I wasn't sure what to think. It was clearly a transcript of a recording Donald had made, which explained its stream of consciousness quality. What it was an aggrieved compendium of women he had expected to date, but who, having refused him, were suddenly the worst, ugliest, and fattest slobs he'd ever met. The biggest takeaways were that Madonna